Labour in fresh chaos over Brexit as minister backs customs union. So Peter Kyle, the Business and Trade Secretary, just told an international audience at Davos that Britain would be crazy not to look at joining a customs union with the EU, which sounds reasonable until you remember that literally yesterday Rachel Reeves ruled it out, and that Kyle himself called it foolish just a few days ago, and that Keir Starmer has made not joining a customs union one of his famous red lines. So we've got a government where different ministers are saying completely contradictory things about one of the most important economic policy questions Britain faces, where individual ministers are contradicting themselves within days and where nobody seems to have any idea what the actual government position is. That's not just mixed messaging, that's full-blown policy chaos broadcast live from a Swiss ski resort to the global financial elite. Welcome to UK Political Insight, where we watch Labour's Brexit position implode in real time. And today we're diving into why Kyle is contradicting both his colleagues and himself, what a customs union actually means, and whether Starmer has completely lost control of his cabinet or whether this is some incredibly incompetent attempt at flying a policy kite. Buckle up, because this is Labour doing what Labour does best, turning a straightforward policy question into an existential party crisis complete with contradictory statements, hurt feelings, and absolutely no clarity about what they actually want to do. Right, let's start with what Peter Kyle actually said, because the specific words matter when you're analyzing a political car crash. In an interview with CNBC at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which is where politicians and billionaires gather annually to pretend they care about making the world better while drinking champagne in the Alps, Kyle said, "When it comes to the customs union, we need to be having these conversations as a country about where is the best anchor, what is the best opportunities for Britain's economy post-Brexit. Now, of course, it would be crazy not to engage with the prospect of a customs union." Crazy not to engage with the prospect. That's pretty clear language. He's saying not considering a customs union would be insane. That's not "we should think about this carefully" or "there are pros and cons." That's "we'd be crazy not to do this." And he frames it as needing a gentle debate about what's best for Britain's economy. All very reasonable and sensible, except for one tiny problem. This directly contradicts what the Chancellor said literally one day earlier. Rachel Reeves ruled out joining a customs union. Not maybe in the long term, not will consider all options, ruled it out, as in it's not happening, as in stop asking because the answer is no. So within 24 hours, we've got the business secretary saying we'd be crazy not to look at it, and the chancellor saying it's not on the table. These aren't subtle differences in emphasis. These are fundamentally different positions on a major economic policy question. But wait, it gets better, because Kyle himself had said earlier this week that pursuing a customs union would be foolish. He told the Financial Times, "When it comes to a customs union, I understand why lib-dem utopianism is so seductive. It took us 4 years to leave the customs union. Do people really think we can join the customs union quicker than it took to leave the customs union? I think at the moment it would be foolish to slip towards what would be simple solutions." Foolish. That was his word just days ago, and now it's crazy not to consider it. So Peter Kyle has gone from calling a customs union foolish to calling it crazy not to consider it in the space of a few days, while also contradicting the chancellor who ruled it out yesterday. If you're confused, imagine how confused foreign investors at Davos must be trying to figure out what Britain's actual trade policy is. Now, before we go further, let's actually explain what a customs union is, because this is one of those terms that gets thrown around in Brexit debates, but not everyone fully understands. A customs union is an agreement between countries to charge the same tariffs on imports from outside the union and to allow free movement of goods within the union without tariffs or customs checks. The EU has a customs union, which means all member states charge the same tariffs on goods coming from, say, China or America, and then goods can move freely between France and Germany or Spain and Italy without customs checks. When Britain was in the EU, we were in the customs union. When we left the EU, we left the customs union, which is why there are now customs checks on goods moving between Britain and the EU, why there's paperwork and delays, why businesses complain about the costs and complexity of post-Brexit trade. Rejoining a customs union with the EU would eliminate those checks and paperwork for goods, making trade easier and cheaper. But here's the catch. If you're in a customs union, you can't set your own trade policy. You can't negotiate your own trade deals with other countries because you have to charge the same tariffs as everyone else in the union. This was one of the big Brexit arguments. We needed to leave to take back control of our trade policy, to strike our own deals around the world, to not be bound by EU regulations. Rejoining a customs union would give up that control again. So this is genuinely a significant policy question with real trade-offs. Easier trade with Europe versus independent trade policy. Lower costs for businesses trading with the EU versus flexibility to do deals with other countries. There are legitimate arguments on both sides. What there shouldn't be is complete confusion about what the government's actual position is. Kyle tried to manage the contradiction by saying any change would be long-term. He pointed out that it took Turkey 20 years to join the customs union, and it took Britain 4 years to leave it, so this isn't something that would happen quickly. He said, "I am focusing on what it takes to get growth into the economy now, and of course this is a gentle debate, whereas the debate of the Brexit years ripped our country apart. We are now back together as a country, and we've got stable government with a 10-year industrial strategy." This is classic political damage control. When you've said something controversial that contradicts your colleagues, you reframe it as long-term thinking that doesn't change immediate policy. Yes, I said we should consider it, but it would take decades anyway, so don't worry, nothing's actually changing. It's the political equivalent of "I'm just asking questions" when you've actually made a pretty clear statement. And the bit about a gentle debate versus Brexit ripping the country apart is interesting because it suggests Labour is trying to gradually shift the Overton window on Brexit without triggering the kind of explosive political warfare that dominated 2016 to 2020. Have quiet, reasonable conversations about maybe, possibly, in the long term, reconsidering some aspects of Brexit. Don't make it a big, dramatic fight. Just gently nudge the conversation towards closer EU alignment. Except this strategy only works if everyone's on the same page. If the business secretary is floating a customs union membership while the chancellor is ruling it out and the prime minister has made it a red line, you don't get a gentle debate. You get confusion, contradiction, and accusations that the government doesn't know what they're doing. Kyle also dismissed suggestions that Starmer had lost control of his cabinet, which is exactly what you'd say if Starmer had lost control of his cabinet. No minister is going to say, "Yes, actually, the prime minister has completely lost grip on policy, and we're all just saying whatever we think." They'll insist everything is fine, there's no disagreement, these are just different perspectives within a united government. But when you've got ministers contradicting each other within 24 hours, those reassurances ring pretty hollow. The broader context here is that several Labour ministers have been hinting at support for a customs union. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy and Health Secretary Wes Streeting have both suggested they'd be open to it. So this isn't just Kyle going rogue, this is multiple senior figures in the government signaling that they think Brexit should be revisited and closer EU alignment pursued. But Keir Starmer has explicitly made not joining a customs union one of his red lines. Along with not rejoining the single market and not returning to free movement, these are the three things Starmer has said Labour will absolutely not do. They're meant to be the boundaries that prove Labour has accepted Brexit and isn't trying to reverse it by stealth. They're the reassurance to Leave voters that Labour isn't going to betray the referendum result. So when multiple ministers start publicly questioning these red lines, it creates a serious problem for Starmer. Either he enforces discipline and makes clear the red lines are real, which means slapping down senior cabinet members for speaking out of turn, or he lets the debate continue, which undermines the red lines and makes him look weak. Neither option is good. The Lib Dems, who have long supported rejoining a customs union because they opposed Brexit from the start and think we should reverse as much of it as possible, are absolutely loving this chaos. Their Europe spokesman, Al Pinkerton, said, "Peter Kyle hasn't just contradicted his cabinet colleagues, he's contradicted himself just 24 hours ago. The Labour frontbench is all over the place on the customs union." And he's right. Kyle has contradicted both his colleagues and himself. That's not clever political positioning. That's not flying a kite to test public reaction. That's just incompetence. You can't call something foolish on Monday and crazy not to consider on Wednesday and expect people to think you have a coherent position. The accusation that the government is all over the place is damaging because it feeds into broader perceptions that Labour doesn't know what it's doing. We've covered multiple U-turns, policy chaos, ministers contradicting each other. Adding Brexit confusion to the mix just reinforces the narrative that this is a government without a clear plan or the ability to enforce message discipline. Now, let's talk about why this matters beyond just political point scoring. Brexit is done, we've left the EU, that's not changing. But the nature of our relationship with the EU is still very much up for debate. We could pursue closer alignment, making trade easier but giving up more independence. We could maintain current arrangements, accepting the costs and friction but preserving policy autonomy. Or we could pursue even looser ties, prioritizing independence over trade facilitation. Each of these paths has profound implications for the British economy. Trade with the EU is still massive despite Brexit. The EU is literally next door. Geography matters for trade. If we make trading with Europe harder, British businesses pay the costs in paperwork, delays, and lost opportunities. But if we align more closely with the EU, we give up the ability to